part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Look up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's Superman.
This is Jason J. Lewis, the voice of Superman on Justice League Action. This is Mark Wade, writer of Superman Burgoyne, and you're listening to the Krypton Report.
Hello, Brooks here with the Books with Brooks monthly book club podcast. Here's how Books with Brooks works. We read one book a month, and then we talk about it. Classics like Stephen King's The Shining, debut novels like We Are the Brennans by Tracy Lang, and tons of other compelling, life-changing stories, one book and 1 month at a time. So come read along with us, and then listen in.
This is Dan Jurgens, and if you want to have a good time, keep listening to the Krypton Report.
Remember to check out Krypton Report on all social media platforms. Go to linktree.com/Krypton Report. You find all of our information right there. And if you want to keep Krypton from exploding, join our $1 a month Patreon. That's right, for $1 a month, you'll get extra special content that you don't get on the main show, like movie commentaries and whatever else comes out of our mouths. So check it out, patreon.com/Krypton Report.
If you are like Tyler and James and can't get enough super talk, check out these other podcasts. Digging for Kryptonite, Supergirl Radio, The Last Sons of Krypton, the Superboy Legacy Podcast, All-Star Superfans, Superman the Animated Podcast, The Aspiring Kryptonians, Always Hold On to Smallville, Caped Wonder, The Geek of Steel, and Truth, Justice, and Hope podcast.
Hey, we're going to press pause and hear a few words from our other podcasts on Press Play Podcast Network. Welcome to the Krypton Report podcast, the greatest podcast you'll ever listen to. That's truth, not lies. I'm your host, Tyler, the Superman of Blue. With me is James, the Superman in Red, the Man of Steel, also known as Mr. James Cole. And we talk about Superman. And
yeah, it's a good majority of the time.
We're grown adults that talk about Superman. You know, some people might have a problem with that, but if you don't chew Big Red, then you. That's what Ricky Bobby says. I love making James laugh, people. It's one of the joys of this podcast.
Well, sometimes you just come up with some of the most random stuff.
That's the point, man.
Oh yeah, I know.
The point is like, what can make James go, huh? Today.
What?
So, on today's episode of the Krypton Report, we are going to be discussing the miniseries, 6-issue miniseries, The World of Krypton. That's right. It was done just recently. It wrapped up, and we had thought about and talked about reviewing it as it was coming out. But then the more we talked about, the more we realized, you know what? Let's just kind of wait and see what the whole story is, and we'll go from there. It was written by Robert Venditti, who had recently we had reviewed his Superman 78. And
yes, we did.
Before we talk about the miniseries, though, let's just talk about Krypton's history of the destruction. You know, I did some research. I was kind of going through trying to put together what exactly the history was of the destruction of the planet. And it kind of comes down to just basically the same things, just kind of overdone. So here's some. The planet was created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster and was named after the chemical element Krypton, the homeworld of Superman, which is first mentioned in Action Comics #1 and made its first appearance in Superman #1, which I covered recently on a podcast last month. it had a red sun, and in the post-crisis is when we really get the most history of the destruction. And let's see. The young scientist Jor-El was born into this world. By his adult years, a mysterious green plague was killing Kryptonians by the thousands. And upon researching the matter, Jor-El discovers that its cause was a growing radiation produced by Krypton's increasingly unstable core. This process was going to cause the planet to explode. That's more of the John Byrne post-crisis story of Krypton's explosion. In Golden Age, it was pretty much just the planet exploded. The first non-comics version of Krypton was presented in the debut storyline of the 1940s Superman radio series. In the radio show, Krypton was part of our solar system, a counter-Earth sharing Earth's orbit, but on the opposite side of the sun, hidden from the view of the Earth. Krypton derives from the Greek word for hidden. Some comics of the early 1950s suggested a similar theory, but in general, the comics have depicted Krypton as being in a far, far away star system, in a galaxy far, far away. The Supergirl, the series, the episode Hostile Takeover, revealed that the planet was destroyed due to over-mining its core. The third season episode Dark Side of the Moon revealed that Argo City was preserved along with many of the inhabitants on an asteroid. And that's more of the Man of Steel origin from the film, was the mining of the core and stripping the natural resources and making the planet unstable. In The New Adventures of Superman and Super Friends, in one of the lost episodes of Super Friends seasons 1983 to 84, the Krypton Syndrome, Jor-El says that Krypton will be enveloped by their sun and explode a short time later. In Superman the Animated Series, we know that there's a polar shift in the planet, and Brainiac doesn't want to help. The novelization, Last Son of Krypton, the 1978 novel by Elliot S. Maggin, contained a description of Krypton mainly referencing the Silver Age version. It describes the planet as a failed star with massive surface gravity and extreme hostile conditions, which forced an extreme adaptation and rapid evolution in the descendants of humanoid space travelers and their dogs, who became stranded on its surface in prehistory. This led to an extremely strong, dense, and durable Kryptonian species with unusual physical properties. Maggin described the rise of a civilization which uses geothermal heat as its primary power source, developing science and technology, but finding it difficult to escape the massive world's gravity. Eventually, its internal nuclear reaction led to the planet's Krypton's explosion. Which I think that's really kind of neat when you heavier your gravity. Let's see.
Yeah, much more dense. I know that was some of the early abilities was just from being from Krypton. He had the abilities because he was naturally stronger, more dense, more durable.
And then, so another version, and this was kind of used in the Krypton series and in the book, which I actually plan to read sometime soon, the 2007 novel, The Last Days of Krypton, by novelist Kevin J. Anderson, presents the last year before Krypton's destruction. In this, it is tied much like the TV series Krypton. When Brainiac took Kandor, it made the planet unstable and damage to the core, which led to its explosion. Let's see here. And then there are the other two main kind of what happened to Krypton was in the New 52, there was like a group of people that were causing issues for Jor-El. He was looking into it. They were trying to keep it hidden. And there's a whole long explanation on here. I won't go into all that, but the New 52 deals with the clone revolt and a whole history of war and civil war, which leads to why there's only 3 major cities left on Krypton and leads to its destruction. And then, of course, recently, the less favorable Rogol Zar is to blame for the destruction of Krypton, which is, not going down that Bendis. So that's a brief.
Well, there's still no reason as to why. What he is, where he's from, if he's the only one left of his kind, and if Krypton was responsible.
It was a whole wasted character and everything. Just sucked, Bendis. So that's just a brief history of kind of, where the ideas of what happened to Krypton came from. And then we get this series. And I'm going to say this up front. Love the cover art. Hated when I opened the book.
Yeah.
I love this cover. I was like, dang, that's some good stuff. And open the book. I'm like, that's some crap. But we're going to go over the book. And, you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right, issue 1 is written by Robert Venditti. And it starts basically where we see this green image orb, this basically shepherd-looking lady who, it says the planet Krypton from the Field Journal of Nira entry 206.79. It's my 28th day in Jewel Valley. And basically looks like she's watching over a herd, and the herd is all dead. And then we go to Kryptonopolis, which I'm going to tell you right now, I hate that name. I hate it. I always have. Like,
yeah, it sounds weird.
It doesn't flow. Like,
no.
It's like it feels.
I guess they needed the metropolis of Krypton, apparently.
Yeah, it's stupid. But anyways, and if you notice the way that it's drawn, the city sits high above, like almost like it's hovering above the actual planet.
Yes, it does.
And so we find Jarrell and Lara, who are preparing for their niece's naming day ceremony. And which I like about this is we actually get a story with the brothers, with Jor-El and Zor-El. So we have welcome,
even a cousin.
Yeah. We have welcome the patriarch and matriarch of the House of El, Jor-El and Lara. And we see, it says, Laura, will you give him advanced instruction? It says, we chose Kara. Meet Kara Zor-El. It's a very beautiful little baby there. And then we have Zor. Oh, it's our friend. Thank you, crew. Thank you for coming.
Cruel.
Oh, I was like...
like, you really name somebody Cruel.
Yeah.
Like...
Hey, and...
no, he's not the bad guy of the story.
Don't forget about Origel. And then we meet Drew. The conquering general returns. Return, tried, retired, old friend. So we have the brothers together with their friend Druzad. They're all toasting. It's a great time. And then we have the lady that we met at the beginning, meeting Jor-El, telling him what she found. So Jor-El is now being put on the task of figuring out what's going on. Back at the party, 2 people bust out and say, "Free Krypton." and Drew Zod bounces in action. We see cover Kara and someone yelling death to the L's. That's hardcore. And then we see where's the security force from Drew. Jarrell jumps into action. He's fighting. And the guy pulls a gun on Jarrell. And then he's going to shoot him. And then boom, Zod puts him down. And then Kara's safe. Somebody's down. Somebody's dying. Where is Zod? They ask. And then Zod comes up, slams down the person responsible for everything, and it's Cruel. Dum dum dum.
Yep, he'd be next in line as elder of the house if Jor-El, Zor-El, and Kara were all dead.
Kind of getting a little bit of Game of Thrones vibe going here, like the house,
pretty much,
and everything. And what I liked about this is I like the story idea of the brothers being friends with Zod. So,
yeah.
Issue 2.
As we go through, I like the story because the story, as we find out, takes place over like a solid decade.
Oh yeah,
maybe even a little bit more, because Kara is at least about to be in her teen years.
I'd say so. Yeah.
So, each issue there's a bit of a time jump,
which I think helps the story. Like, you set the stage, you meet the characters, and then we move on from the characters. So
right.
So let's pull out issue 2. And let's see if there's any, how much time. Issue 2 starts with the trial of Cruel. And it looks like he is put into the Phantom Zone. Because we have some really cool artwork.
Well, actually, that's Jor-El.
Oh, you're right. My bad.
Yeah, Jor-El and Zor-El are trying to, what they call, find a survival zone. A place where Kryptonians could go in case, something disastrous would happen.
That they're planning.
They're on the... Yeah, they're already on the lookout right now. Herds of animals just dying without reason. No disease, no famine, nothing like that. Just basically just dying off. And yeah, he goes in. He's in the survival zone, what becomes the Phantom Zone, and he's only in there for. He says, "Why did you wait so long to end the experiment? Jor, you were only gone 18 ticks." He said, "Impossible. It was months."
Jeez. And that's something that we've known about the way the Phantom Zone is time is non-existent.
Yeah. And the idea that in this is the Phantom Zone where you're a phantom, like we've seen in the New 52 Phantom Zone, like we've seen in Young Justice, and what other versions? But where you can't
Smallville, kind of.
Yeah, where you
kind of.
kind of where you can't see anything, you can't touch anything, you can't smell anything, you can't hear anything.
And you're, like you said, you're a phantom, basically a ghost.
Yeah.
And I like this because I like seeing that we have the two brothers working together. So,
they discuss the experiment. They talk about that it's too dangerous. That it's too dangerous to be used, and that they're going to stop that project. But there's a panel where Zod is very interested in the Phantom Zone projector. Talk about his retirement, how's retirement treating him. He's got he's basically got a job opportunity kind of to become the head of security for Krypton.
I like that Zod's patch, though. Like, we've talked before how there's not been a, hey, this is what the official Zod logo is. We've seen many different versions of Zod's logo, so I appreciate what this looks like. It's very much in line with, like, the Rebirth Zod.
Yeah.
And then we jump 2 months later to the sentencing of Kruel. And we have Zod come out, and he says, Kruel, you are hereby banished for eternity to the void dimension known as the Phantom Zone.
I like the panel just before that when Jor-El, he's saying no. He just looks so, like, he's slouched over, the shadows over his eyes, like his invention being used for such a terrible purpose.
I mean, totally. Like, this is what it makes it interesting is, the foreshadowing that's here. Jor-El says Zod a word and they start arguing. He's like, it's a matter of justice. Zod's like, not war. And all the science, all the progress, where do you think it ends up? I fired your science from the barrel of a weapon more times than I can remember. And I want to remember. I know what I've done and to whom. Do you? And then we have the brothers trying to, talk at the end. And then the book ends with Jor-El going to talk to Lara. And the book is,
well, what I kind of like about this is Jor-El he's not necessarily the scientist who discovered it. There are other things happening in the world that other members of the scientific community are witnessing, and especially Naira who is the woman who witnessed the species dying out. But they are he's talking about how her findings are ignored and that his family is the news of the day. Not the fact that the planet is dying or anything like that. And it takes time for him to what's really cool is how they continue to talk the science aspect of him trying to alert people over such a long period of time and the dangers that are happening to the planet, and nobody's listening.
Yep.
Like, it's not just this prophesized end, within weeks or whatever of the planet being destroyed. Like, oh, it can't possibly happen. It can't possibly happen. It can't happen like this, like without warning, it's ready to blow. No, the planet's deteriorating, and over years they're experiencing that and ignoring it.
I like it because it makes it more tragic. And I like that just where Jor-El is mentally about what's going on. And then we see at the end, it's kind of, it looks like it's Jor-El, like almost as if he's watching Kruel inside the Phantom Zone. but we're not really sure if he is or if it's just very well kind of matched up with the imagery. Because Lara says to him, it's up to him to save this world, not run away to another.
Yeah.
So, on to number 3.
There's definitely a lot weighing on Jor-El in this story.
And like I said, I like the cover art, man. Like, each issue has, like, the planet starting to explode more and more on it.
Right.
The next issue has Zor-El, Alora, looks like Crypto, and Kara, however you want to say it. But, more time has passed because we see, like, she's, what would you say? I don't know, 8, 10? I can't remember if they say how old she is.
They don't really specify the way she's talking. She's somewhere, 8, give or take, I would say. Yeah, but they're talking about studies. Like, she's talking to a teacher, a possible tutor.
And, we know that Krypton values education. And we see this book is called Changing of the Guard. And we see planetary security, and there's Zod. And he's making himself more showing his might and his power over Krypton's people. We see the Congress of the Science Council.
Well, Zod, he's arresting so many people. Like, he's arresting people here protesting. It seems like it's supposed to be like a legal protest, and he's arresting them. And they talk about the fortress is already at capacity. Could be like Fort Ross. They don't ever specify.
Which I'm like, they should have, because
yeah,
that's really easy to do. But no, they don't. So, I don't know. It's just kind of weird that they don't specify Fort Ross. It's like one of those like super easy name drops to put in there.
Yeah.
But oh well.
But they can make up the bad guy named Cruel.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I love me some Cruel L. DeVille.
Cruella DeVille.
But yeah, it is kind of weird. But what is interesting is we have the Science Council is talking about all evidence points to a single conclusion: our planet is deteriorating at its core. As chair of natural sciences, Nira has been tracking the effects on our ecosystem. You're all familiar with her findings. They're incredibly bad. Have you determined the cause of the deterioration, Jor-El? I have not. So, it's interesting. We have people saying, Jor-El, it's interesting that you have a problem, but you're not posing any type of solution to this problem. And it's interesting that everyone kind of knows about what's going on. We have all this time, but there's not as much action.
Right. Well, Jor-El eventually poses some sort of a plan. Energy emitters at each of the planet's poles. They can create we can create a reinforcing shield around the core. Think of it as a pocket reality where the core can exist in its current state as long as the emitters maintain the shield. Should the shield cease to exist, the deterioration will begin again and continue unabated. Interesting thing is it's going to take massive amounts of energy to produce this shield. And they don't know how to create that without actually taking it from the rest of the entire planet. So Jor-El believes that Krypton as a people will bind together and sacrifice the things that they don't require energy-wise to be able to save their planet.
Jor-El.
Yes, which is something that Jor-El possesses as we go further into the story, is his
hopeful optimism.
His hopeful optimism that the people as a whole will do what's necessary. And then we find out, is it in this one?
We see the Jewel Mountains, how they're
farther.
getting destroyed. And then we see that Jor-El adopts a rescue pup for a donation of, I guess it's like $1 million. Like if in our money, I don't know. It's a lot. And
Yeah. Well, the original head of the Science Council, he stepped down, and he recommended Jor-El to succeed him, and they voted Jor-El as the head of the Science Council. So he becomes the head of the Science Council. I'm sure you'll hold the chair with distinction, Jor-El, and then we go to the Jewel Valley, and this is sometime later, because we see like the thought beasts are bones, and what seems like volcanic activity. It's very green.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then Jor-El goes to get a puppy.
And then at the end, Zod shows up to thank him for his promotion. And so the next issue, issue 4, basically this one picks up right at the end of the last issue, because you have Jor-El and Zod.
He gets the dog, and the dog's name is already Crypto.
Yeah,
I like that. And then he's like, he's like, that's his name, okay.
I like it because it kind of helps with the, really, you're gonna name, yeah. But yeah, the next issue, what I find interesting is just how Drew Zod's kind of like freaking out. Like, we have a point where he says, "Our planet is a flame from the inside out. Fire doesn't understand your moral appeals." He's like, "Calm down, Drew." And he's like, "Fire burns." And Drew tosses Jor-El down.
Well, like he says, you speak of tyranny. He's basically saying that Zod is going down the route of a tyrant, because that's his which is opposed to Jor-El's beliefs. Coming to this point, is Jor-El believes that everybody on Krypton will work together to save their home, and Zod, he doesn't believe that that's the case, and the only way he believes to save Krypton is force the people into
Submission.
into giving up. Yeah, into giving up what they don't need to save the planet.
Yeah, it's very interesting. 2 different ideals, and is one right? Is one wrong? That's a tough call.
Oh, it really is when you talk about the end of the world.
You know, because you expect people to do what you feel is the logical thing. I'm not saying it's yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the hopeful thing, you know, the way that would lead to less suffering and less resistance, perhaps.
Perhaps. But it doesn't seem to be working that way.
Yeah. After Zod pushes him through the window, like Jor-El kind of attacks him, and he's not doing anything. He says, "You won't allow it? I don't require your permission. I'm the elder of the House of Zod. I am a leader." And he smacks him. Krypton exists because Zod's bled on battlefields across the stars to safeguard it. The House of El exists because of Zod's. And he smacks him again. You, Jor, you exist because of me. And then Lara bursts in.
And she smacks.
And she smacks the taste out of Zod's mouth.
Tells him to get out. He says, "I'll move without you, Jor. This isn't about you and me anymore. It isn't about Zods and Elves." Then we jump 1 month, and we have Jor basically talking. And he's, throwing a speech out there of, "This is about our survival. I've shown you the data. The Science Council has voted that my findings are conclusive. What has happened already cannot be reversed, but hope remains. We can unite all of us and stop the course deterioration." And he gives this whole speech, and we see Kara trying to talk to her parents, and they kind of brush her off. And we see Zod watching the speech, and
he turns off the speech. Zod, we received word from the Security Council. We are authorized to gather the first cluster of inmates. He calls it, this is the Kryptonopolis Planetary Incarceration Facility. Your attention by orders of the Security Council, in accordance with the new planet-wide austerity measures we must all take part in. It has been determined that the population of Krypton's entire prison system will be relocated to the Phantom Zone. I make you one guarantee: you will not be lonely. And he sends in groups at a time. You can't do this. There are laws. I want to talk to my barrister, and he just sends him away.
And that's not someone who makes coffee, just so you know.
It's not a barista. How will it...
Go ahead.
I was just further going in the book. What were you saying?
No, I was going to say what I really like is when we have this panel of Zor-El talking to his wife about how Jor-El's not a father. He says, "My brother has responsibilities of every living thing on this planet pressing down on him, and unliving things too. All of it is lighter than one little girl." I like it because I like seeing the two brothers. It's what any father would do. And then we have Lara show up, tells Jor-El, "We need to talk." And in the immortal words of the great Rodney Carrington, he says, "If a woman ever tells you we need to talk, light a fire in the house and run. It's easier to deal with, because when a woman says we need to talk, it usually means you need to sit there and listen while I tell you all the ways that you've been screwing up." So yeah, Jor-El might be getting Yoda.
I mean, I don't know about that.
But issue 5 has a beautiful cover. And even looking at the covers, like if you look at the first issue, and that represents Jor-El, he looks a lot younger than he does in issue 5 cover.
Yeah.
And issue 5 starts where Zod's basically recruiting people. The right needs might.
Almost like drafting people.
And we have Zod's forces engage with protesters, brutally attacking protesters. And then cuts back to Jor-El says, "Was I wrong, Lyra? Was I naive to hope our people would see the sense in saving themselves? Hope is never wrong, Jor, but maybe it was misguided to believe everyone would see things exactly as you do. What other way is there?" She says, "Give me your hand. Feel. He's kicking more today." And see, I like this, but I hate that we don't actually see her tell him he's going to be a father. It's like, we need to talk, and then it jumps to
It jumps to he's kicking.
Yeah. And then in the next page, we get kind of this juxtaposition of Zod's people with the protesters, and then Jor-El basically telling Lyra they have 6 months. And he's telling them his people can face the end. And she asks him, he hugs her and leaves. She says, "Where are you going?" And he says, "To preserve what little remains." And I like the artwork that we have of like people in the Phantom Zone. And then we see Zor-El working really hard on something. The Anther has to exist. There must be a survival zone. And we see that Kara's a little older. And then Jor-El goes to Zod, and he says, "I've come to stop you for Krypton." And Jor-El's wearing like some armor that looks a lot like reminiscent of like a Superman suit. It's blue, red, yellow belt, trunks.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't make sense, but whatever. And then we see Lyra in the lab, and she's looking at a star map. And then
This is let's get to work.
And that's the issue. I mean, this was a brief issue, to be honest.
It was very quick. Yeah,
And
it was a very quick read.
It was dialogue light, a lot of imagery, and
yeah, it's just basically there's not much that Jor-El can do, so he's kind of at a loss, and Zod is just raining down tyranny on everybody. So it's very bad for the world.
And then issue 6, we see basically Allura, Kara, and Zor-El stuck in between the two rising factions of protesters and Zod's people. And then we see tonight it ends, Zod. And someone find General Zod is what they're calling for. And there's Jor-El versus Zod fighting. And he says, "I'm here to fight for Krypton." And they fight. And they fight.
Like Jor-El must have taken a little bit of self-defense classes in between last time they fought.
I blame the suit.
You blame the suit?
Yep.
Hey, maybe. I mean, he is the head of the Science Council.
And then Zod throws some stuff in Jor's eyes. And he gets away. It looks like he's holding a Phantom Zone projector as Jor-El's looking for him. Meanwhile, Zor and Kara and Allura are trying to dodge the mob. And they're looking for Kara, and they find her knocked unconscious. And then we cut back. We have intercuttings, basically, of the riot and the battle between Jor and Zod. And looks like Jor-El knocks Zod out with a statue. And he grabs the Phantom Zone projector. And he says, Drew Zod says, "You've got a Phantom Zone gun in your hand. You want to be more like me. Now is your opportunity." He says, "I love you, old friend." Jor-El does. And then he shoots Zod into the Phantom Zone. And then breaks the Phantom Zone gun. And we get back to him, basically, with Laura, and she says, "How long do we have?" He says, "Months, 1 year at the most. Come see something." And she walks him in, assists him on the map. She says, "I used an access leader of Science Council to scan beyond our known star system to search for any inhabitable worlds." He says, "For whom?" She says, "For our son." Basically, the past is no place. It's gone. Our son can have a future through him, us, and our people. Where there's a chance for a future, there's always hope. And that's where it ends.
Yeah. I do kind of like how it was Lara who found Earth for him.
Yeah.
She was concerned about his safety above all before Jor-El was.
I like it
because Jor-El had basically given up at that point on Krypton, at least.
It gives more to her as a character. How did you like the book overall?
I mean, it was a fairly quick read. The artwork isn't terrible, but it's definitely not what I expected.
The artwork,
especially with the covers.
That's what I hate. Is I feel like they sell me on the cover, and then the artwork inside is horrible. Kind of like.
Well, what I tell you when we first talked about it, it was like Riley Rothmo's art mixed with Ramita art, like in a very cartoony way. And neither one am I particularly fond of. But I think together, the way that this is, it kind of works for the story they're telling, because it's a very alien world that they're showing, and even the paneling is done with different borders that make it look like it's supposed to be, like Krypton.
Yeah, I like it. My only thing about this series is I feel like they build it up to something, and then it kind of like it ends on a okay note. But I feel like you could have made this maybe 2 issues longer, fleshed out the world a little bit more, because it's like we start and we jump, and then we get really tight with one tight story, and then it ends. Why don't you just go and do an issue which is the last day of Krypton? Because you build up like the Zor-El story, and you build up the Jor-El story. Why not do an issue and show them sending the kids off into space? Why not? If it's called World of Krypton, why not explore the world a little bit more? Like, another 2 issues or something. Could have gave us a.
I do think there is a lot more story to tell from it, because there are so many jumps. I mean, it starts with the naming of Kara, and then by the end, which the one thing I do kind of like about the story is it wasn't about the ultimate end of Krypton. It wasn't about the planet exploding and Kal-El being gone. It was about Jor-El and Zod, different views on trying to save the planet.
I did like that.
So the fact that it doesn't actually go to the climactic moments of the planet, I actually kind of liked. But I do agree that there is a lot more story in between that they could have told.
Yeah. And I think
just such large time jumps.
And that's my one thing is like, and let's talk about how Krypton as a society is thriving in the Phantom Zone, because there's not just like 3 prisoners in the Phantom Zone. Like, one of the big things was always that Krypton had done so well with crime and peace and all this that they didn't have really as much punishment. And then when Zod does his coup and they sentence the 3 or 4 or 5 criminals, depending on the story, to the Phantom Zone, it's a big deal. And those are the ones that are in there. And now we have an entire world of people in the Phantom Zone.
Yeah. And most of them, they're just
wrongfully,
wrongfully imprisoned for one, and then thrown in the Phantom Zone just for posterity's sake, just for another way of population control.
Exactly. But hey, it was a good story. This is one of those, like, I think it's primed for a really good animated film.
Yeah, it could. I mean, unfortunately, I think the animated film would suffer from some of the bits in this, but also I think the way that they've tried to do, I think the best way that they would be able to do it is actually try to get over get through the passage of time,
Mm-hmm.
and the deterioration of the planet. Like, it would definitely have to build up the dire circumstances,
because I think there's
to be more effective, because I think they would rush through it. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, with
the time jumps, it would just be boom, 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 boom from one spot to the next.
I mean, you can look at this story underlining of, if we want to put it in real world, climate change, how some people don't think it's a big deal and don't want to adapt their means of living to help with climate change. There's themes that can be explored here and fleshed out, I think, more, that are just kind of glossed over. So, but what would you give it on a letter scale as a one story?
A B minus. B minus. I enjoyed it. It was a decent read. It wasn't too, for the themes of the book, for it being, for Zod reigning over in tyranny and the dire state of the planet, and the possible assassination attempt of family, and an infant child. I mean, I think it was for those things, for how serious it was. It was good. It was a decent read. It was, for those themes, it could be very heavy and very wearing
Mm-hmm.
on you reading through it. So it's not so overly heavy when it comes to that. So it was a good book. It wasn't great, but also it wasn't, it wouldn't take you too long to read through, and I think you would at least enjoy what they did and incorporated in the world of Krypton.
I give it a B. So, but hey, it was enjoyable. I liked it, and I always like learning about Krypton. It's weird because sometimes they tell us stuff about Krypton that I'm like, this makes it horrible. And sometimes they give us Krypton stories where I'm like, this enriches everything. So it's great. What do you guys think, listeners?
Right, because I think the the discovery of the Phantom Zone, the abandonment of the project, the use of it without permission, and then basically like the illegal imprisonment of people there in the Phantom Zone. Like, that was a really cool element to the story.
Yeah, I mean, it was like I said, there's a lot of great themes I feel like were in there that they just were like, we're gonna kind of just touch on it briefly.
Yeah, that's mostly it. It's touched on briefly.
But all right, dear listeners, thanks for tuning in, checking us out, and
Look up in the sky.
we just want to say, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please check out other podcasts on the Press Play Podcast Network.